Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and in today's video, I'm going to be doing a review of the QNAP QGD-1600P. This is a pretty little mutant beast right here. Basically, this is a PoE Switch that has a server built in, that has a desktop computer built in, that actually can do virtualization. It is a nifty, neat product that I want to show you today. Now, for FTC compliance reasons, I do have to say that QNAP actually sent me this device, and basically it's on long-term loan. To be clear, they're not paying me a dime. I'm not earning a cent from QNAP. They said that they just said that they would send this to me, and they asked how long I would like to keep it, and I said a long, long time. And they said, okay. So that's kind of the FTC compliance here. This is a $699 device, so take it or leave it. But again, if you followed me for any length of time, you know that my reputation is more important than any piece of crap. So one of the things I'll just hint here, foreshadowing here, on the TL did not watch for this video. The user experience for this thing is total and complete garbage. Just so you know, I'm not selling out to QNAP. I'm not selling out to these big manufacturers. Let me be clear, right here and now, whoever designed the user experience for this thing should be fired. They should be fired. They should be blacklisted, and they should be forced to work in a floral shop for the next decade. This is a really cool device, but the user experience is absolute garbage. So with that, let's get into the review. So I was so excited to get my hands on this little thing. QNAP contacted me, one of their PR people contacted me and said, hey, do you want to be able to test this thing out? And I took a look at it and I said, yes, absolutely ship it to me now. I said that before I dealt with the user experience. Have I told you how bad the user experience is on this thing? It's miserable. But anyway, so you may be asking, why do I care about this? So I care about this because I'm doing a lot of Arduino projects. Basically, what I want to focus on for a lot of my education going into the future is IoT. So this is what is called an Arduino microcontroller. This is actually an Arduino Uno with Wi-Fi. This has a full TCP/IP4 wireless stack actually built on to the microcontroller. So I can connect sensors to this and actually have this communicate with a server, and I can have a server basically format commands and have something like this be able to read commands. So basically I can have 10 or 20 or 100 of these in my infrastructure. Some can be collecting data, some can be triggering events based off of what a server has to say, so on and so forth. But again, one of the problems you get into in the IoT world is what is the brains for this going to be? Again, when you're dealing with microcontrollers, they all have to communicate back to something, and then the whole question is how do you build out that infrastructure that they're going to be communicating back with? So why I was really excited to get my hands on this thing is I really think this can be a major component for a backbone for an IoT infrastructure. The reason being is so what this has 16 PoE ports. So these are power over Ethernet ports. So that means not only can you use them for networking, but you can also use them to power devices, such as surveillance cameras, such as wireless access points, such as some of these Arduino and Raspberry Pi if they have the PoE module. So basically you can just connect a network connection to the PoE switch and actually be able to power devices. One of the really cool things with this is all 16 ports support up to 30 watt of PoE power, so that's pretty significant. But then 4 can actually do up to 60 watt of PoE power. So that means you're going to have 4 relatively powerful electronic devices being powered from this, and then the other 12 ports can pretty powerful. Again, 30 watts over PoE is significant. So the first thing I was excited about this is it has the PoE switch, and so that's really nice. Obviously, the connections to a backbone and all of that. Then beyond that, what's really cool is this actually has a server built into it. So if we take the top off of this, we can take a look. And basically, as you can see, there's RAM here. You actually have one of their QNAP server solutions actually built into the switch itself. So if you ever dealt with QNAP before, It's basically, Synology, all of these NAS providers, they have their own little operating system that allows you to run things like web servers, database servers, all kinds of stuff like that. That's actually built in to the PoE switch. Then beyond that even, their operating system supports virtualization. So if you want to spin up virtual Ubuntu servers or some kind of Linux or Microsoft servers, you can actually spin them up within the server that's built into this unit, so that you have full control over whatever you need. Again, this could be very important if you're dealing with the Microsoft stacks. If you're dealing with the Microsoft stack, you're dealing with things like Active Directory, more niche products that, again, may not be used necessarily in the Linux world. You can actually spin up your own Microsoft server within a virtual machine on this. And actually, so again, all of your IoT devices and all that can communicate back to that server, and that server can do whatever you want. Then, what's cool beyond that is if you take a look at the front, you actually have an HDMI connection, you have a network cable, and you have USB connections. And this is basically, it gives you a Linux type. It's not the greatest. A Linux desktop. So essentially you can plug this into a rack. You can plug a monitor, keyboard, mouse, external storage, or whatever else directly into this. And then you can manage the server or do other things. So basically what's built into this one QNAP device is you have the 16-port PoE switch. You have the QNAP server component that supports virtualization. And then on top of that, you have the desktop component. So again, the cool part is you can just shove this into a rack, or hell, not even a rack. You can just put this on a shelf at your customer, your client, your office site, and then this might actually be everything that you need, not just the networking, but also the server solution, also for the maintenance and all that type of thing. So that's why I'm really excited about this. So now that you know why I'm really excited about this, let's go over to my little work area, and I can kind of show you the insides of this a little bit better without having to hold this in one hand. So here's a QNAP, a little more up close and personal. Again, if we take a look at the front of it, we can see our 16 PoE ports. We can see the HDMI connector, the USB. We can see the connector to the trunk lines and all of that. We can see that we have the little display. This gives you the information for things like IP addresses and all that kind of stuff. And it basically looks like a pretty normal front, except you get this nice HDMI connection and that type of thing. Now if we put this down and we simply take off the top, we can look at the inside of it. And again, this is a pretty cool little setup. So right here, this is the whole server component. Under here is the Intel processor. So it is an Intel Celeron processor. Now, if you're like me and you hear the word Celeron, the first thing you're going to go is like, Celeron, yay! What I have to say about the Celeron after using this for a little bit is once the machine has booted, let me be clear, once the machine is working, the Celeron does not seem to be that bad a processor. Again, I have an Ubuntu server installed on here, and everything seems to truck along pretty well. Again, you've got to deal with what resources you have. You want to put you're not going to make this into a gaming machine or anything. But again, if you put like a command line Linux distribution, a couple of command line Linux distributions, that type of thing on here, to be clear, once this system has booted up, it actually performs surprisingly well. So you have the Celeron processor under here, and then you have 8 gigs of RAM in this particular model. So when you're looking to purchase one of these things, you can get one with either 4 gigs of RAM or 8 gigs of RAM. Again, one of the nice things you can see is these are just normal RAM slots. So basically, if you get the 4 gig version, you should be able to slot in another 4 gigs if you want, so on and so forth. I was doing a little bit of research about if you could upgrade the RAM to like 16 gigs or actually put more RAM in here, because I'm all about that virtualization. One of the things I really think is really cool is being able to run the virtual machines. From what I could tell, at least by Intel specifications, the Celeron CPU only supports 8 gigs of RAM. So one of the things you have to be careful about, you could put 16 gigs of RAM in here, but it only supports the 8, right? So even if you put 16 in here, it only recognizes 8. So that's something just to keep in mind. Then for storage, as far as storage is concerned, basically you have this little bay over here. This supports up to 2 solid-state drives. Again, one of the really cool, nifty things about the modern world is these solid-state drives can actually get up to like 7.5 terabytes of storage right now. Think about that for a second. So you could literally have 15 terabytes of storage in this device simply by slotting them in. So again, that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, like in the IoT world. So if you have all these sensors connected back to here, again, surveillance cameras, any of that type of thing, think about a device like this, 15 terabytes of storage. Absolutely insane. Then you actually also have PCI Express expansion slots here. So for the PCI expansion slots, they have a wireless card connection that you can get. They also have a storage connection. So there's a PCIe card that you can put M.2 drives onto. All the card drives. Anyways, M.2 storage onto. So they do have expansion with PCIe here. So what you can see is again, I mean, it's not a desktop computer by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a little bit of upgradability here, and you could actually put in some things to really make this impressive, as long as you don't need anything more than a Celeron processor in order to make it run. Okay, so here's the fun part. Let's actually get this thing up and running. So the first thing, of course, you're just going to want to slap the top on. Though, to be clear, there's no sensors or anything. If the top is off, you can turn the whole system on even if the top is off. But again, for things like airflow, that type of thing, I would highly recommend that you put it on. Then past that, you take your little power cord. You plug this into the back. Then you take your keyboard. You take your keyboard, you plug that into one of the USB connections. You take your mouse, you plug this into one of the USB connections, and then you take your network cable, you plug this into one of the network ports, and then you take your HDMI and you plug this in. And so that will drive the little screen right there. Now, the important thing, as you connect all of this, this is the first place we get into the disaster of the user experience for this QNAP device. Have I said the UX people need to be fired? Blacklisted? Sent to the floral mines for the next decade? So when you're dealing with this, right? So in the technology world, you know, we talk about physical devices, and then we talk about logical devices. So a logical device is like a switch, a wireless access point, a router, internet modem, right? Those are all different logical devices. Now, in the past, in the way back when, they used to also be their own physical device. So you would have a switch, and the logical device and the physical device was simply a switch. The router was the router. The wireless access point was a wireless access point. Well, in the modern world, we now have multiple logical devices that are basically put into one physical device. So if you go out and you get your, you go out and you buy a wireless router, a Wi-Fi router, right? That actually has a wireless access point. It has a router. It has a switch. It probably also has a number of other components built into it. So it's numerous logical devices built into one physical device. Now, if you deal with other technology companies, they wrap that into a pretty easy-to-use package, right? Again, if you go and buy a Linksys wireless router, you'll be able to deal with the switch and the Wi-Fi and the router capabilities relatively easily. You know, it's all relatively seamlessly bound together so that it not only looks like one physical device, but also when you go to administer it, it feels like one device. The thing is, when you deal with QNAP, what you have to realize is these are all different things. They basically simply just duct tape and superglued all of these physical devices into one thing, and they called it, you know, a physical device. And so basically, you have your switch here, and the switch can be functional away from the QNAP server. So you can actually turn the switch on without turning on the server. Not only that, but then for this desktop component, you actually have to install that additionally. So one of the curious things to realize is the desktop component has its own username and password. The server component has its own username and password. And even the PoE Switch has its own login, server name, and password. So that's just one of those things to be keep in mind. And that's one of the big problems. Like one of the big problems we get to with this QNAP is this is the quick installation guide right here. Look at this. Look at this quick installation guide. This isn't a joke. So, okay, you put on the feet, and you put in the hard drive, and then you go here, and that's supposed to walk you through the process. One of the big things that I would say is if you buy one of these, expect to take 5 or 6 hours, at least the first time, just simply figuring out what the hell is going on. That's literally how bad the UX is. So anyways, okay, with that, we have this plugged in. We have all the things plugged in. So there's a power switch on the back. We're going to flip that on. Or actually, wait a minute. One of the things I want to do is I want to show you how long this thing takes to boot. So I'm going to open up my phone. I'm going to have a timer. And so first thing I want to do is actually turn the whole unit on. But one of the curious things is when you turn the whole unit on, that's not necessarily turning on the server and the desktop component. So there's a little power switch here that's almost impossible to see, and so you need to click that on too. And so now that I've clicked that on, that's now say booting. So I'm going to click start. I'm going to click start. And so we're going to see how long it takes to go from me clicking the little thing here for starting until we actually get to a desktop. And with that, I'm going to just go and I'm going to watch, I'm going to watch some YouTube videos. And we're going to see how long this takes. Because literally, one of the biggest pains with this is the Celeron taking to boot this. It takes a long time. Look at that. We're already the 28 seconds. And we don't even have a screen yet. Let me make sure. Alright, so here we are. Okay, so that's on now. Okay, so what we can see, so it says it's starting. It says it's starting. We're 49 seconds now, and it says it's starting. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna watch a YouTube video, and we're gonna fast forward through this. I'm just kind of curious. I have not actually yet timed this. But it takes a long time to boot. Look, we're at a minute now. At a minute. Still booting. Still booting. I'll just put my feet up like this. Okay. And dun da 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 da. Okay, so look at this. Look at this. I'm not joking about this boot. I'm not joking about the boot. 3 minutes. We are at 3 minutes. I still do not have a login screen. I just want everybody to know out there when I get snarky about these products. When I get snarky, I'm not making stuff up. You can see the timer. Anyways, let me go take a little bit more of a nap. Okay. Oop, oop. Let's see here. We're now at the 5-minute mark. Alright, so we got that. Okay, so the server is up and running. Let's see. What's going on with the... Okay, so at the 5-minute mark, the server is up and running. But for some reason, the desktop isn't coming up yet. Let's see here. Why is the desktop not coming up yet? Oh, okay. Okay, wait a minute. Okay. Oh, there we go. There we go. Six minutes. I was actually worried there. I was genuinely worried. I was like, oh, crap. I'm going to have to troubleshoot this machine. Maybe I did something wrong. Nope, you saw it. 6 minutes and 8 seconds to get to the login screen for the desktop component. So again, Celeron seems to work okay for the server component, but like if you actually have to reboot this thing, it takes forever. Just to show you, we're not going to go into this a lot. It's a pretty crappy little desktop operating system. But you can click on the admin. You can type in your password. Numlocks. 1, 2. Come on. Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We hit enter. Then we're gonna log in. And basically, this is the kind of desktop you get. So when they talk about the desktop, it's this weird. It's Linux, but it's very Android looking. To be clear, though, you do get things like web browsers. So I can click on the web browser here. So I can click on Chrome. I can open Chrome up, and then, like I say, I can go to like let's say EliTheComputerGuy.com. Just to show you, it will go out to the internet. It actually does go out to the internet. So in here, you can do basic tasks. You can get out to the internet if you need to. One of the big things is you can get to the control panel. So basically, you can actually control the server itself from here. I think you go to QTS in order to do that. So basically, this gives you the ability to do administrative tasks directly from this machine and to be able to go out and get to the cloud, that type of deal. So from here, this is the login to the server component, admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And basically you can log in and you can do your administration. So that's a useful, so basically you can have, this all hooked up in your little server room, and then you don't necessarily have to remotely access it. You can access it locally. So 6 minutes to boot this thing up. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to actually take a look at the PoE, the Power over Ethernet Switch component, the management component, and then we're going to take a look at the server component. So in order to figure out how to log in to both the PoE switch or to the server component, you click on this thing for select, and then basically you find your IP addresses. So adapter to IP is 10.0.1.28. So I'll use that in order to connect to the server. But to get to the PoE switch, you actually keep going. You see switch FW, I'm not sure you can see that. But then from there, it gives you an IP address of 10.0.1.27. So first we're going to go take a look at the PoE switch, and then we're going to look at the server component. And on that, we're going to use my little MacBook here and do that over the network. So let's go over to the MacBook. So here we are at my MacBook. I plugged in 10.0.1.27. Basically in my web browser, the MacBook is connected to the network, and then we're going to log in. I've left everything default here. So again, one of the important things to understand is logging into the PoE switch is going to be different than logging into the server component, right? So this is the server component, and this is the PoE switch. So the PoE switch, we do admin, we log in. I just left it at the crappy, default password, and then we're looking at the PoE management. So we can get a bit of an overview. We can look at the CPU power. We can look at PoE status. We can look at power consumption, that type of thing. We can go down, we can see the devices that have been connected to the PoE switch. We can go down to configurations. And it gives you some basic configurations here. So you can take a look at the status of ports, what are going on with the different ports in the switch. It has a PoE, it has a VLAN, it has link aggregation. So if you want to group multiple ports together in basically one logical network adapter, you can do that. As traffic, has a bit of security, IGMP. The QoS is interesting, so they have a quality of service. Basically, this is for prioritization, but for this, it actually appears just to be a port number prioritization. So you can say port number 1 has a higher priority than port number 2 or port number 3. So maybe you want your, I don't know, if you have real-time communication, maybe you have voice over IP phones, things like that. You may want the ports that they're connected to have a better priority than FTP ports, something. Then you have port mirroring. So basically you can mirror ports in order to basically do some troubleshooting, that type of thing. Loop protection to protect you from getting loops. Basically, if you have a large network and you end up essentially creating a loop within that network, this will try to prevent any problems from that, so on and so forth. So basically, this is the PoE management component. The important thing to understand is this has a different IP, a different username, and a different password to connect to. Then from there, we can go over to the actual NAS unit itself. So when I was looking at those IP addresses, 10.0.1.28, that's for the internal NAS unit. Password here is admin. Then password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can hit enter, and again, you would have whatever security you want. It's wanting a firmware update. We're not going to worry about that now. When you log in, this is going to be the desktop that you're looking at. Kind of one of those ugly desktops. Same kind of desktop you're going to see from Synology or any place else. If you go over here, you can see the different applications that you have installed in order to get to the configurations a little bit easier if you want to. If you click on the control panel, that's when you can go into some of the more sophisticated configurations for the server. You can see the general settings, you can see storage and backups, you can see users, so you can create users and groups. There's a whole bunch of different networking services here, applications, so on and so forth. One of the cool things with the applications is if you go over here to the App Center, you can actually install a lot of different applications for the internal NAS unit itself. And this may be valuable, again, in an IoT world. Let's say you don't want to go to the trouble of creating your own version of Linux, right? You don't want to actually spin up a virtual machine in Linux or an operating system. One of the cool things is if you go here, you'll see they have a lot of support for the different technologies that you may require for whatever IoT projects you have. So you can actually install, they have Node.js that you can install directly onto the NAS. Again, you don't need a virtual machine. This is installed directly onto the NAS. If we go down, they have Perl. Apparently Perl's still a thing. I thought Perl died a while ago. Well, you got Perl. You got PHP-MyAdmin. Again, so you can actually have MySQL databases directly on the NAS, and you can have PHP-MyAdmin. I installed this and to be able to manage those databases. If you go down, you can have Python installed. Again, Python either 2 or Python 3, again, directly installed onto the NAS operating system. You don't need your own virtual machine. Then they've got things like proxy servers and all kinds of different things that you can install directly onto the NAS OS, and this may make your life a little bit easier than, again, like actually spinning up and going into running your own virtual machines. Past that, if you go over here, you can click on this dashboard. So this dashboard is kind of like the task manager or whatever. It shows you what's going on with the machine. It shows your NAS unit is good. It shows, your CPU fan, what the RPM is if you care. Shows your CPU utilization. It shows your RAM utilization. Though I will say, again, you've got 32% RAM utilization with not much going on with this machine at this point in time. So again, if you're going to be spinning up Linux virtual machines, or we're going to be spinning up virtual machines, you do have to realize there's not a lot of resources on here. But this gives you some things. Now, what I'm actually interested in, what I think is the coolest thing, is the virtualization. So you have this thing called Virtualization Station. If I click on this is where you're actually able to create and then manage virtual machines. So I actually installed Ubuntu. So I have the Ubuntu server operating system, just the command line version that's been installed directly onto the NAS. So if I click on this, I can actually open it up. I can resume what I was doing. I can hit OK. And now I can actually interact with this virtual machine. And again, this virtual machine has a full IP address, so you can actually connect to it. Again, from the outside world, you can have your IoT devices connecting it to it and so forth. And as you can see here, I am actually at the command line. So, I can do, whatever the hell I want. At the command line to actually be able to administer this machine. And so this is one of the things that makes it really cool. Oops, what did I do? LS, L is what I wanted. What makes this really cool is not only am I locked into whatever options the NAS has, but since I can spin up my own virtual machines, that means I could set up my own environment with all my own code, my own databases. Basically, I could build my own system for all of my little devices to be able to communicate with. And so this is probably the coolest thing I like about this entire unit, and I think this is one of really big selling points. But this is kind of an overview of what this thing looks like. Again, there is a lot here. There is so much here. This is something that honestly, if I was going to do, I thought about doing classes on it, but honestly, it would be about 20 hours of classes just to explain everything that's going on. So if you do buy this unit, just realize you're going to have a bigger learning curve than you're expecting. The user experience is a mess. But this may be like one of those things that you've been looking for a long time. So there you go. There's my review of the QNAP QGD-1600P. if you're willing to go through the learning curve, if you're willing to go through the learning curve, I really do think that this is a cool product. Again, like I say, you've got the PoE Switch built into it. You've got their NAS operating system built into it. On top of that, it can actually run virtual machines. Again, if you're dealing with command line, I want to be hammering the hell out of it with graphical operating systems. But if you're doing command line operating systems, 8 gigs of RAM and a Celeron processor is probably good enough for you. Beyond that, it has the desktop component. Beyond that, again, you can add your own storage. So again, you think about the IoT world. Think about that. You could add 15 terabytes of internal storage to this thing. Think about how much data this thing can collect. If you have a virtual machine, it could then process and do things on that data. I think there's a lot of really cool possibilities. Then again, like I say, you've got the ability for the PCIe expansion, so on and so forth. The drawbacks to it is again, the UX people. The UX people need to be sent to the flower mines. They need to go down. They need to spend the next decade of their life chinking out daisies and roses and pansies out of the flower mines or something. I don't know what the hell they're thinking. And again, I just want you to grasp, like everything that I showed you with this, and this is the paperwork that you get. This is literally the paperwork that you get. What? So what I will say, the drawback on this thing is the learning curve is most likely going to be steeper than you're expecting. Sure as hell was steeper than what I was expecting. Again, it's not that you can't figure it out, but you're like, really? Seriously? Who the hell built the UX? It's going to be steeper. Though what I will say, like if you're going to be using this for your business, it's a type of thing, you get your IT director, you get your IT manager, they play with it for a week. You come up with your own documentation on how your organization will use it. And then I think you can get other people up to speed pretty quick. Like, so now that I understand this, if I knew what I was going to use this for, I think within an hour I could get other technicians up to speed on what they need to do. The problem is when this comes in a cardboard box and you've never seen it before. You're like, what? Past that, I mean, really, one of the big drawbacks is, again, the boot up time is ridiculous. Again, in the IT world, there's a lot of that feeling of, when in doubt, reboot. When in doubt, reboot. Be careful of doing that with this machine. As you saw, before you get the IP addresses and can connect to the server component, that takes at least 5 minutes, and it takes 6 minutes to get to the desktop component for a reboot. So be careful. I'm not saying don't reboot. But before you redo it, like really think about it. Be like, do I need a cup of coffee? Do I need to take a piss? Do I need to call my wife? Like, that's the thing. Like before you reboot this, think about the other things you need to do in your day. And then start the reboot process and then go do those other things. One of the things I didn't show you is if you think the boot up process, if you think the startup process takes a long time, I didn't have the patience to show you the shutdown process. Like the real shutdown process, hit the shutdown command and actually have it go through the shutdown process. What the hell? I swear, if you did a reboot on this, if you did a clean, like by the books reboot on this thing, I think it's 10 minutes. I haven't seen this reboot this long, literally since NT 4.0. I don't get it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But anywho, so yeah. But overall, again, as a product, as an IT professional, you gotta deal with what they're actually selling. You want everything. What I want is, but you've got to deal with what they're actually shipping you. And I really do. I have to think for an IoT world again, like because why I keep bringing up the whole IoT is in the tech world. There's this real idea. There's these parallel focuses for where processing should happen. So basically where compute should happen. So on one side, the idea is pushing intelligence to the edge. So the idea is that your surveillance cameras, your phones, your devices will have more and more intelligence in them, right? That's one big push. And then the other big push, obviously, that is push the intelligence to the cloud, AWS, Azure, custom systems, right? So there's this real big push of either make the device really smart or make the cloud really smart. The problem you get into, though, is, again, resources cost money. Right? So the smarter you make a camera, the more that camera is going to cost, right? That's just how it is. The more RAM you put in the camera, the bigger the CPU, the more stuff you put in the camera, the more it's going to cost. And the problem with full-fledged cloud, again, Azure and AWS and all that kind of stuff, is what happens if somebody puts a backhoe through a fiber line? And I always use that as an example because that actually happened with my company at one point. We had a company, we had 100 people. Our entire office went offline because they were doing construction down the road, and they literally put a backhoe through the fiber line. And so one of the things you have to think about in the modern IoT world is if your IoT devices, all of the intelligence, all the storage, all of that stuff is completely offloaded to the Azure cloud, to the AWS cloud, to the off-site cloud. As soon as a backhoe goes through your fiber line, your stuff stops working. Now, that may not seem too bad if it's just sensors, right? If it's temperature sensors and environmental sensors, okay, your environmental sensors are down. It sucks. Just have people walk through the facility, make sure everything's okay. But what happens when you're using your IoT devices to trigger physical events? Again, like when I'm doing these projects, not only do I want my Arduino devices to be able to sense their environment, but I also want them to be able to do things like turn on fans, to turn on water pumps, to deal with physical access control, locking and unlocking doors. Right? So if all the intelligence, all of the commands are happening off-site, as soon as a backhoe goes through my fiber line, all of my IoT goes down. So what I would argue is you add something like this to your infrastructure, again, with up to 15 terabytes of storage, and you got that little Celeron compute in there, you can have all of your devices communicating with this. This can give basic instructions. This can do basic outputs. This can be bringing everything in and storing it. Then you can have this communicate up to the cloud. And so maybe have the more advanced functionality, the bigger storage or whatever up on the cloud. But then if somebody puts a backhoe through your fiber line, you can still have this doing the basic management of your local IoT infrastructure. Again, you think about things like cameras, right? So like this is an access camera. So let's say you want a camera system set up and you want to be able to bring all the videos back to one location, and then you actually want those shared with the corporate world. Well, again, when you're dealing with video, one of the problems with video is the bandwidth utilization is massive. Again, because you're dealing with video files. Video files are the largest files, more or less, that you're going to deal with. So if you've got 16 cameras all pumping video out to the cloud all the time, that may cause problems with your overall network. So your cameras are pumping out video while your people are doing voice over IP calls, while you're trying to do emails and all that kind of stuff like that. So that's going to saturate your bandwidth. Well, think about this. What if all of your surveillance cameras send their data back to a unit like this that stores it, and then after everybody goes home at the end of the day, this then pumps everything back up to the corporate servers because there's nobody on the network anyway, right? Again, if you've got, let's say you've got a 200 meg internet connection, right? You don't want to saturate it during the day because other people are using it. But as soon as everybody's gone home, then this thing can then just literally spend the next 12 hours pumping out at 200 megs to try to offload everything that's on here up to corporate. Or again, like I say, if you're thinking about the surveillance world, if a backhoe goes through your T1 line, your fiber line, basically all your video files are stored here until the internet connection is restored, and then at that point, this starts pumping it back up to the corporate servers. So again, let me be clear. There are a lot of people that need a pat on the back at QNAP. At QNAP, a lot of people need to get a pat on the head, and you need to buy them some pizza and buy them some cake, buy them some flowers, say, You did a really great job. I am really excited about this product and hopefully future products. Again, imagine this with a Xeon processor. If you get 15 terabytes of storage on this, imagine a Xeon processor with 32 gigs of RAM to really be able to run virtual machines. This entire concept is really cool. Again, once I got the darn thing up and running, it seems to be stable. We'll see. We'll see as time goes by. Again, I do actually plan to use this as long as they allow me to keep it. So I'm really excited about that. Sadly, you just got the UX. You just got the UX. Those people need to be fired. Those people need to be fired. The rose mines. They need to be sent to the rose mines of Bangladesh or something. I don't know. So anyways, those are my honest opinions. QGD-1600P, $700. I would really, again, if I was running an IT shop, and I really wonder with this. Again, I'm not in a production environment anymore, so I can't test this as heavily as I'd like. But something to really think about for any of the like managed service providers out there. Imagine if you could spin up, a mediocre Windows Active Directory server on this. Right, imagine if you could spin up a Windows Active Directory server on this, use it as a file server, use it for some basic, tools, routing and remote access, that type of thing. Like, that's one of the interesting things about this is imagine, so if you have a 10-person office, you want Active Directory, you want VPN, you want file sharing, you want print sharing, you want that type of thing. I honestly think you could use this, again, let's max it at about a 10-person office, maybe 20 if it's light usage. But you can have this could just be the box. You just go to the company, you just put this box on a shelf, and now this is everything. So anyways, I'm just gushing at this point. I like this. Again, they're not giving me any money. They are letting me keep it for an indefinite lease period. And I will be using it again. The reason that I'll be using this is when we're doing these IoT projects, the fact that it is a full-fledged switch, the fact that I have the processing power, I can run the virtual machines. Like, that's one of the things that I'm looking at. Obviously, I've got bigger like desktop machines I can run Linux off of, but something I'm looking at is like power consumption, right? So with this, I'm already going to have a switch running. So a little Celeron processor, hopefully this doesn't take a lot of power. So when I'm doing my IoT projects, I can leave this on 24 hours a day and not really worry about it. It's not taking up a lot of additional space. It's not running through a lot of power. I can just have this running, do my little modifications, do my little tests, and not really think about it anymore. So anyways, there you go. Those are my thoughts. QNAP, whatever it is. QGD-1600P. If you are going to buy it, I would recommend you buy the 8 gig version. Again, you can buy the 4 gig version or the 8 gig version. Might as well buy the 8 gig version. And then beyond that, do make sure to actually buy a solid state drive so you can slot it in, actually use a lot of the functionality. And with that, as always, I enjoy doing these kinds of videos. Look forward to seeing the next one.